This is how Germany's roads look these days. Too much traffic, exhaust fumes, and noise. Conventional automobility is reaching its limits. Electric cars are meant to be part of the solution, quiet and supposedly clean. But how are the raw materials for their rechargeable batteries obtained? Take lithium, for instance.
They earn millions and millions of euros, but they sacrifice human life. They sacrifice animals. They sacrifice life.
Cobalt is also essential. Nearly 2/3 of the cobalt produced worldwide comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's mined in shafts like this one.
The work is really very dangerous. There are accidents almost every day on these sites.
Is electromobility not as clean as we all think it is? Transport planners are pinning their hopes on electric cars. They're still fairly rare, but that's set to change soon. Mobility researcher Stefan Bratzel is convinced of that.
We assume that starting in the mid-2020s, we can expect at least 15% of new vehicles registered to be electric. That would be 15 to 20 million newly registered electric vehicles in 2025.
Millions of electric cars, powered by rechargeable batteries weighing hundreds of kilograms. They contain rare minerals, manganese, graphite, cobalt, and lithium. Each battery contains from 20 to 30 kilos of lithium carbonate. Here, deep underground, lies the lithium that German car makers depend on. The Atacama Desert in Chile, one of the driest places on Earth. The Salar de Atacama, a huge salt flat, lies in the north, on the country's borders to Argentina and Bolivia. Its surface is encrusted with salt for kilometers on end. But deep in the ground, there's mineral-rich water, and that's where the lithium is to be found. This mine extracts the ultra-light metal. Pumps bring the salt water from the ground up to the surface. It ends up in huge pools. In the heat of the desert, the water evaporates. The pools in this mine alone cover 44 square kilometers. A landscape of evaporation pools stretches all the way to the horizon. It takes 5 months for the water to become a viscous substance. It contains about 6% lithium. Tank trucks take the concentrate to a factory. There it will be processed further to make lithium carbonate. The mine uses enormous amounts of groundwater, about 21 million liters every day. But the Atacama Desert is already one of the driest places on Earth. Rain almost never falls here. Still, where there is water, there's life. The small oases around the salt flat have been settled for millennia. People here have always been good at rationing valuable water. A few crops, a few goats. That's their livelihood. Jose Zuleta is 92. Every day he still works in his garden. There's more sand than soil in the ground he tills. But when there's water, his plot bears fruit.
Pears, plums, figs, even oranges. Normally everything grows here.
He can still live from the fruits of his labor, but water is becoming scarcer all the time.
We have very little water. It always came from the canal. But look at this. Now there's no more water flowing through it.
Farmer Christian Espíndola is also worried that soon nothing will grow here. This used to be a small oasis. There were people here, animals, and fields.
It was paradise. We had enough: water, fruit, life, animals, pure nature.
Atacama's farmers no longer have a future. Christian Espíndola is sure the lithium mines are at fault.
Everything's parched because the mining companies pump out the groundwater. They've dried out the village. The mining companies have caused this. It's death.
German car makers need huge amounts of lithium. The impact here is dramatic.
You people at the other end of the world, you should know this. They produce lithium and make victims of us. They earn millions and millions of euros, but they sacrifice human life. They sacrifice animals. They sacrifice life. That's how the world is, and nobody cares.
El mundo está así. No le importa nada a nadie.
The indigenous farmers on the Atacama Salt Flat face an uncertain future. More and more new evaporation pools are being built. Chile aims to more than quadruple its lithium production by 2025 to up to 350,000 tons a year, mainly because of the rising demand from car makers. But resistance against mining is increasing, as it is here. The oasis village of Peña lies on the southern rim of the salt flat. There are mines everywhere. Sergio Cubillo is captain of the local football team. He's also head of Peña's indigenous community. For millennia, these people have lived in the few places where there's water. Then the Chilean government sold the water rights.
To make money, they suddenly guaranteed all the water rights to the mining companies. We villagers sometimes have to turn off our water so that we have some for the next day. We don't understand how people can have no water while the mining companies keep wasting it.
But it's not just humans here who are affected by the mines. So are the flora and fauna on these salt lakes. They're home to various species of flamingo. The birds feed on tiny algae and crustaceans. Lithium mining is threatening that ecosystem. Biologist Matilde Lopez from the University of Santiago has no doubt about that. She and her co-worker Jorge are traveling to a salt lake today. Even from her car, she can see that things have changed.
I'm worried about the large area of dried-up lagoon on this side. All the places where you now see only salt used to have water. There were no salt flats here. There was water.
Matilde Lopez started her research in the early 1980s. Back then, everything was in order. Then the lithium mines came. More and more water was pumped out. That caused the groundwater table to sink, and with it, the water levels in the lagoons.
That has an impact on the small animals and plants the flamingos feed on. And when the Andean flamingo becomes extinct, so will the fox, the final link in the food chain.
So it's not just the majestic birds that are affected. The salt lagoons are a multifaceted ecosystem in the otherwise inhospitable Atacama Desert. Some animals exist nowhere else in the world. The water table is sinking. This lagoon is becoming saltier, and the biologists' measurements bear that out. The scientists find scarcely any small organisms in their samples, but the flamingos depend on them.
The Salar de Atacama used to be home to the largest population of Andean flamingos in the high Andes. With the lithium mining that's now planned, the flamingos won't survive.
For millennia, nature was in equilibrium here. Then, industrial countries needed rechargeable batteries for their smartphones and clean cars. What followed was a lithium rush. Santiago, the Chilean capital. Raw materials account for about a third of Chile's economic output. They bring important foreign currency into the country, but it's money from which the city of Santiago mainly benefits. Chile's Minister of Mining has no intention of giving up the income generated by lithium.
Lithium is a natural resource that's currently in high demand for electromobility, and it boosts the national economy. But we should learn from other countries that have not sacrificed their environment for these resources. I think environmental protection and mining can be compatible if companies invest in the latest technology.
Matilde Lopez doesn't believe new technologies can be of any help. She says the effects of mining in the Atacama Desert are too severe, even today. She's already worried about what she might find on her next visit to the salt flat. Volkswagen's transparent factory in Dresden is a showcase for electromobility. The world's biggest car maker is making its new e-Golf here. The company aims to be the market leader in electric cars by 2025. The factory may call itself transparent, but VW is less so when asked where the lithium for its batteries originates. Please kindly note that we cannot comment on our suppliers or sub-suppliers as the information is competitively sensitive. BMW, in contrast, does at least admit that lithium from Chile is used in its e-cars, and it voices responsibility for the local environment. We always choose our suppliers based on the strictest criteria where sustainability is concerned. Locally, there's no sign that these statements have any effect. German car makers are faced with a dilemma. Right now, they're dependent on lithium from Chile for e-vehicles. But there may be an environmentally friendly alternative in the long term. That's because there are deposits of the valuable light metal in the Ore Mountains that straddle the Czech-German border. Once tin was mined in these pits. Soon, miners will be digging for lithium. At least that's what Armin Müller plans to do. He's head of the Deutsche Lithium Company. He wants to start next year.
The project must be carried out soon, because the current world market prices of lithium and lithium compounds are very high. The sooner the product is on the market, the more we can take advantage of these high prices and earn more money.
Müller needs the high prices to make underground mining financially viable. Exploratory drilling has been successful. According to Müller's calculations, the lithium reserves would be enough for some 10 million cars. But environmentally friendly mining would still have to overcome several obstacles.
Environmental protection regulations are very strict in Germany, as they should be. They're stricter than other regions on Earth, like South America. Of course, those restrictions will make mining more expensive.
So perhaps lithium from Germany could replace at least some Chilean lithium. But there's another raw material that German car makers urgently need for their electric vehicles: cobalt. The batteries contain between 10 and 15 kilograms of the metal. Nearly 2/3 of the world's production comes from a single country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Joseph Kabila rules with an iron hand. One way he funds his regime is by selling cobalt. This is where it comes from: the mining city of Kolwezi in the south of the DRC. Some 500,000 people live here. The city sits on a huge deposit of cobalt ore. It's excavated in a mine on the city limits that belongs to a Chinese company. There are only a few jobs for local residents. Many have to make do with what they can scavenge on the slag heap. Practically none of the money German car makers pay for cobalt arrives in Kolwezi. Very few people have clean water. There's no sewage system. No waste disposal. Everywhere in the city, there's dirt and refuse. But the locals also want to profit from the cobalt boom. In a mine near Kolwezi, about 5,000 men are searching for the coveted mineral on their own. With them are many children. Manuel and his men are here every day. They'd been digging in their shaft for 3 years.
We don't have a license to look for cobalt here. When we've sold this ore, we bribe the mine supervisors and the police. Then they leave us alone.
They have no professional equipment, just cheap headlamps. They go down barefoot and with no safeguards. It's a vertical drop of 45 meters. They use their hands and feet to support themselves on the walls of the shaft. Down in the mine, it's cramped and stuffy. The miners hack at the rock with rudimentary tools. Then they scoop the cobalt ore into sacks. After just a few minutes, the air is full of cobalt dust. It's highly toxic and causes severe lung damage. Without face masks, breathing becomes increasingly difficult. At least 6 men are needed to pull the sacks up to the surface. It's exhausting work. The rocks contain about 8% cobalt. The men are risking their lives, day in, day out, for a battery component.
People die from accidents in other shafts because they take no safety measures. But we anticipate the risks, so we've been fine.
Up to 20% of the cobalt from the DRC comes from these small mines that get dug somehow, somewhere. Kasulo at the other end of Kolwezi. Cobalt was discovered here 4 years ago. The entire village is now virtually riddled with mines. Every few meters, there's a shaft that goes deep into the earth, often right next to the huts where people live. But the cobalt rush has scarcely changed the inhabitants' poverty. Latrines like this are standard. Philippe is one of those who wanted to make big profits from cobalt. It didn't happen.
Our life here in the mining area is extremely tough. All we want to do is leave, but we have no money.
The mud hut he shares with his wife and their 2 children is about 8 square meters in size. 2 tiny rooms, no electricity, no water, no toilet.
This is a very dangerous place, especially for the children. There are deep shafts everywhere. My wife always has to stay with the children so they don't fall in. But now she's pregnant and not feeling well, that makes it difficult.
The shafts pose a deadly danger for the children. Descending into the mines is also hazardous, but the men are glad to have any work at all and earn at least a little money. And they do it even though the shafts could collapse at any time. The rock containing the ore is extremely porous.
The work is really very dangerous. There are accidents almost every day on these sites because the soil is so unstable. And the government doesn't help us at all.
Everywhere in the village, there are shafts that have collapsed. Time and again, workers are buried alive. The men are underground from morning till evening. Despite that, the money often doesn't even cover the most basic necessities.
Children only go to school if their parents can pay. If not, they stay at home. They help their mothers wash the stones.
The men take the sacks to the washing area. There, the rocks are cleansed from dust and dirt. This is the women's responsibility. Only after washing can valuable ore be separated from worthless rock fragments. Many children go with their mothers to the washing area. They've never been to school. They spend the time scraping up leftover bits of cobalt. The whole village sells the ore to Chinese middlemen. But many people feel they're being cheated.
When the Chinese weigh our ore, they always try to double-cross us. They claim that our ore contains only 3% cobalt, even when it contains 10%.
This is where the cobalt ore buyers sit. Musompo Mineral Market outside Kolwezi. Trade is firmly in Chinese hands. The price depends on the cobalt content. To determine that, the ore is pulverized and measured with an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer. Trucks take the minerals to the nearest port. Many deliveries go to refineries in Asia. For years, Matthias John has been tracking the routes Congolese cobalt ore takes. He's an expert on the mineral trade at Amnesty International.
Our study has shown that Chinese companies in the Congo buy the ore from artisanal mines, send it on to be refined in China, and from there the metallic cobalt goes to the producers of battery components and batteries. And those batteries end up in German electric cars too.
So German e-cars probably contain cobalt from small mines in the DRC. German car makers' comments are vague. Daimler writes, "The supply chains include a great many sub-suppliers and are thus, to some extent, very complex. That makes it hard to verify the origin of raw materials. We strive to ensure that our supply chains process only cobalt that comes from industrial mines with suitable sustainability standards." Other car makers present similar arguments. They consider it to be mainly their suppliers' responsibility. But that doesn't solve the problems in the DRC. At the ZSW Battery Research Center in Ulm, scientists are working on a truly clean solution. A lithium-ion battery that works entirely without cobalt. For years, they've been working on the rechargeable battery of the future. Now they've almost reached their goal.
We've now developed a material with energy densities comparable to, or even better than those containing cobalt. We can already build small cells, and we're trying to upscale this material to kilogram levels. At present, we can produce about 100 or 200 grams of this material. Now we're progressing to a 10 kilogram scale.
Cobalt-free batteries could be a reality in 5 years' time. Until then, experts say responsibility lies with German car makers.
It cannot be the case that here in Germany we drive environmentally friendly electric vehicles while the raw materials for their components are mined in developing countries under the most appalling circumstances.
Environmental damage from lithium mining in Chile. Inhuman working conditions in the DRC. That as well is the price of electromobility.